Muted.
Thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Rick Sherman. Here you go.
Thank you. That was Ren Huff, our person who's manning the controls here. So if anything goes wrong, it's her fault. Welcome everybody from sunny, beautiful Salem, Oregon. There's some attendees that are from not from here. So yeah, it's what is it? 80 degrees outside right now, Ren, and beautiful in Oregon. Yeah, sure.
Chance of thunderstorm.
Yeah. Anyway, welcome to a Garden Food Safety webinar. This will be recorded, and we will put it on our safety tab on the Department of Ed Farm to School School Garden website, which is nice. This is the same talk I give a couple times a year to Growing Gardens Garden Food Safety webinar, so it's nice to have a recorded version. So we have everybody muted. It doesn't work to unmute calls because there's so much feedback. So if you have a question, type it in the chat box at any time. And then there's going to be, I'm going to talk first, and then we'll hand it over to Amy Gilroy at Department of Ag, who's going to introduce Louva. But Louva is going to do a little presentation too. At the end of that, then we can take questions. So I'm just going to go through mine kind of quickly. It'll take about 20 minutes, 20 to no more than 30 for me, and then we'll hand it over to Louva. She'll talk, and then we can ask some questions. So, anyway, here we go. Okay, yeah. Again, my name is Rick. Go ahead, next one too. Little bit about me. Can you move that little box a little bit over? Just that's good. I was a food service director for 32 years, the past 20 of those in Oregon. The fun stuff about me was I was a runner, have a new hip now, so I don't run anymore, kind of a bummer. But I was a high school coach in Oregon all those 20 years when I was a food service director too. But I came here 5 years ago after my food service gig. This position opened up in Department of Ed, so I'm now the Farm to School and School Garden Coordinator here. And I do all sorts of fun stuff like ride dirt bikes, raise chickens, and brew home brew. So that's me. Okay, so on to the fun subject of garden food safety. I want to talk a little bit about liability. It's kind of a nasty, bad word, but that is the reason why there is resistance to serve food from school gardens in cafeterias, is because there is a perceived liability. I'm not saying it's a real thing. As far as the Department of Ed is concerned, you can do whatever you want. There's no regulations from us concerning school gardens. However, everyone is liable. You know, unfortunately, we live in a litigious society and anyone can get sued for any reason. If people, you know, they could, if someone were to get sick, you know, the food service director might be liable, the principal, the garden coordinator, the kitchen manager. You know, it's like doomy and gloomy, but the reason I just bring this up is that we have this talk today and a system for alleviating some of these fears. But this is what I get from administrators and sometimes principals, but after I'm able to talk to them for 5 minutes, they're usually pretty good with doing this, and I'll share some of those reasons with you. So a little fact of life for this liability is well-meaning intentions do not make you immune to the laws of physics and biology. I think that's important to note, that there's stuff happening in your garden, and if you leave it up to chance, things can go sideways. Okay, and so we have risks. You can never fully eliminate risks, but you can minimize them if you know what you're doing and have a solid system in place for minimizing those risks. So that's really important. So what's the law in Oregon? And that's Jude law. No one ever gets that. So yeah, no one gets me. So what's the law in Oregon? Next slide. In Oregon, there's no regulations per se for produce as opposed to poultry, meat inspections, things like that. I like to say the county health inspector doesn't care if the food comes from the Cisco truck or the school garden, but they just want to make sure it's handled the food is handled properly. And I say no regulations per se. It's legal to serve school garden produce. There's a couple, I put an asterisk there for a reason, and it's on the next slide. There is an Oregon food code that states that all food must come from reputable sources. So that's the only regulation that's in there, and it's up to interpretation what reputable is, and that's why we're talking today is to make your school garden food reputable, right? So if we have a documented system, that's not an issue so much. And also, you guys might have heard about FSMA, or the Food Safety Modernization Act. That is typically involves farms and produce, but there are exemptions to FSMA, and that's like if you have on-farm consumption, which a school garden would fall into that category, and also sales under $500,000. And I don't think there's a school garden in the country that has $500,000 in sales. So don't worry about FSMA in school gardens. Okay, so it's important to have a system in place for training and documentation. If you had that, your county health department, parents, and administration would love you if you did that. Wouldn't it be cool if someone would create a system for you? And so we have that, and that's what this is on our website. It's available to download for free. It's the Oregon School Garden Food Safety Training and Documentation Manual. Now there's a lot of things out there that talk about school garden food safety, and a lot of them are lists of things you could do. This is the only one that I'm aware of that actually has, it's kind of more of an interactive thing, that it's a documentation tool, and it's again, it's not regulatory from Department of Ed. It's a tool to help you minimize risks, and it only works if you use it and don't just put it on your shelf. But it comes from my background with things like HACCP and things like that in the school food service world. We always had to prove that we were cooking, reheating, chilling foods down properly, and so it's that same principles. And actually, we had this. I drafted this. It took a year to write, and part of that drafting process is we had it reviewed by people that everybody's listed inside the front cover of the thing, but we had like 20 or 30 people from all over the country sign off on it, as well as the county health inspectors that inspect the cafeteria in Oregon. They took it to their gathering this summer and provided feedback and signed off on it. So they all should know about it, and so that's a huge thing for us here in Oregon. And let me do one little disclaimer too, since there are people in other parts of the country listening. A couple. I said what's the law in Oregon because that's what I deal with. I'm the Oregon farm to school guy, and so I would highly suggest for you guys to double check your local and state statutes and see what you guys can or can't do. And this would be a good starting point, and you guys, anybody can feel free to adapt these materials, use them, steal them, whatever you want to do with it. So next. So this is what the guide, the training and documentation manual has in it. So the contents, it has a companion guide or instructions. That's where you'd start first. It has a startup checklist, and that's whenever you're going to start up in either the beginning of the school year or the spring, whenever you start your garden. And then it has a weekly checklist where you are doing things every week. And then there's a USDA best practices for handling food. That's designed for if you are doing, if you're serving food from your garden on your own as a school garden without using the cafeteria, then you can look at that section. If you're delivering it to your cafeteria and they're serving the food, you don't have to worry about that. They're already trained in all this stuff, and so they're inspected and everything, so you don't need to worry about that. I just include this if you don't use the cafeteria and you serve it on your own. So that's what that's for. There's a staff training and log, and that would be your staff and any student leaders, things like that. Your older kids would go through this section and sign off on it. And then there's a student training, and that's basically where you bring in a classroom and talk to everybody at once, and you would just sign in on behalf of the teacher that their class has gone through their boot camp or whatever. And then there's some composting logs, and all these are available to download. You can individually download each section, or you could download the whole manual on our website. So this is our website. It's a new, if those of you who don't know, Oregon Department of Ed has just gone through a massive transformation of our websites. A very fun process that took us months to do, and the farm to school one is pretty much done. There's always a little tweaking that always goes on, but you used to be able to Google Oregon Farm to School or Oregon School Gardens and you'd go right to the website. However, if you do that now, you'll probably go back to the old website that's still up, but it's a dead website. It won't be up for very much longer, I'm told. But you might have to do some scrolling to find the real one. The best I could do for right now, the actual address string is a mile long. If you look at this, the shortcut up at the top, that's a little Google shortcut I created for you. You can copy that down. You could do a print screen. I'll talk a little bit slow so you could jot it down, but that's the best way to go do it. You can go there, and that's the main Oregon Farm to School website one, and you'll go to that. You'll go to this slide, and then if you click on what's highlighted there in the red circle, that is the school garden food safety portion. So there you go. Okay. Again, this process isn't done to be mean. That we didn't want to create work for you if you choose to use it. Again, you don't have to use this if you don't want to, as far as I'm concerned. But you know, when I was a food service director, the inspector always had a saying like, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So this is a way to prove that you're doing some of these principles here and making things as safe as you can be. Okay, so the first section is a startup checklist. It is basically, like I said, at the start of your year, either in the September when you come here, or if you're starting from scratch in the spring, let's say, you would test your soil once a year for lead and contaminants. You could use your local extension in Oregon. That's Oregon State University Extension. Every county has an office. They can tell you who does soil testing. Matter of fact, some places, like even in Benton County, they are doing soil testing for free because they have a little project going on, and so that's something cool for Lynn and Benton folks, and those school garden folks already know about that, but they might have a free thing that they're doing or something. But usually it's not a real expensive thing, but they will test for contaminants in your soil. If you do find contaminants, then you can amend your soil. You could talk to your extension about, or me, and I can help steer you in the right direction about what to do in case, so you can mitigate that. So, but anyway, that's soil. For water, you should use your city water, and if you use city water, then you're fine. Now, a little word about lead in water. That's a big issue here in Oregon. Every school in Oregon, by law, has testing their pipes, every pipe. So you will know if there's a spigot out in your garden cafeteria that that is in the process of being replaced or whatever, or has lead. The good news is we got from the Oregon Health Authority. We went through this summer where it's fine to irrigate or water with pipes that have been contaminated, like with lead. You just can't drink out of them. You should definitely label any kind of faucet that has been found to be bad. It's saying non-potable water, don't drink out of this, but you can irrigate. I won't get into this a whole lot. We do have some irrigation and lead resources on our school garden food safety page that you could read, and it tells you exactly what to do and stuff. So, but you should, use your municipal water, and also you can test your water yourself. I mean, your water should be tested anyway. So in schools, it shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to test it because it's probably already been done, but there are water testing kits you can get at Home Depot and stuff. They're really inexpensive too. I think they're like $7, but so there's that too. Irrigation systems, if you have water collection systems, the rule of thumb that I always say is that would you drink out of it if you use it? Because I've seen some that are really funky. The perfect one should be cleaned and sanitized regularly, so it's not going to have a bunch of stuff growing inside them. So that would be my recommendation. So again, on your startup checklist, it has one person in charge that somebody can get answers from. That's usually your school garden coordinator or a teacher or whoever. And that is, you want one person in charge. So that person should get, at least that person should get a county food handler card. They're very cheap, and you can get them at OregonFoodHandler.com. You can take the test online. I think that last I checked, they were $10. And it's a good thing to have. But anytime you're serving food, you should have a county food handler card. So, and it's a good exercise to give you those principles that the folks in the cafeteria go through too. It's recommended that at least, this is a recommendation again, none of these are requirements from my end, but we recommend that at least one person at your school garden should be certified through a school garden coordinator training process. Growing Gardens does this a couple times a year. They do one at the last week of June. If you go to growing-gardens.org, you can see their school garden coordinator training. OSU Extension has one as well. And if you go on the resources section in our school garden tab on our website, I have these listed on there too. Raised gardens, if you currently have raised garden timber that's already there, I wouldn't recommend yanking them out. I would just say if you're starting from scratch, you should probably avoid pressure treated or railroad ties. Give you an example, I have railroad ties in my backyard and they seep a bunch of black goo. They're really disgusting. After so many years, they stopped doing that. But if you already have those, or they're a good barrier or whatever, that's fine. I would just suggest a couple things, that you have what I call a non-food barrier in between the railroad ties and what you're planting. And like myself, I do marigolds and things like that, and flowers in between the two, so you're not planting up right against them, especially root vegetables like carrots and things like that. It's really hard to prove that you can transfer some of that stuff, but why I would just err on the side of caution about growing stuff next to railroad ties anyway and pressure treated things. Same things with tires. It has been thought to have tires might leach as well, or wood chips, because some of the wood chips might come from pressure treated stuff too, and it's really hard to figure out that stuff. Now, some wood chips, I would just know your source. If you get them from a company like Rexius, they would be able to tell you if their chips are treated, come from treated stuff or not. But I would just, be sure what you're putting in your garden. Chemicals, lubricants, fertilizers, paints, cleaning supplies need to be stored in a locked shed, not close proximity to garden or food. So keep them away from that stuff. So people won't be able to get into them if they're poisonous. And then I would say that, need to prove seeds or plants or anything like that come from a reputable source too. I wouldn't accept food from private home gardens because, again, we're doing this school garden as a way to prove how everything gets into the cafeteria from seed right to the table, and so you have control of the growing process. But once you start donating and getting a bunch of stuff from places that you don't know where they came from, it becomes kind of difficult. So I would err on that stuff a little bit. Okay, so the weekly checklist. Composting is a big deal in Oregon. It's very important for people to compost, and when I was a food service director in the town I was at, it was people wanted to figure out how to do that with chicken scraps, you know, and stuff. So our official stance where we came from is we recommend that you don't compost unless you know what you're doing and have a solid system in place for doing it right, and train and document your process. So if you do it, have a monitored system for collecting, you know, cafeteria scraps, you know, which means you have a responsible adult or a responsible older kid, like a 6th grader, 7th grader in elementary school or whatever, standing there at the compost bin, monitoring what's going in. Because if you leave it empty, who knows what can go into that stuff. So there are good things you can compost and bad things that you can compost. So so we have this composting section in the book that OSU master composters have done for us. And so if you follow the things in this next couple of slides, you should be okay. But so best practices, you got to be careful here. I mean, in Oregon, you don't really have to worry so much about getting kids to compost because it's in our DNA. We're born and raised with it. Matter of fact, you know, I've been to it a couple places. We had an assembly and we showed them the good things to compost and bad things. The kids really get into it. They get excited about it. Matter of fact, one time I was at a school and we were with a couple legislators and we were showing them the composting system, and these kids went up and they loaded their tray full of stuff from the salad bar, ran over to the compost bin and dumped it in, saying, "We love compost." And the food service director about had a heart attack right then. But usually you have to hold them back a bit. So we want the kids to eat their food, but if they have leftover, if they have apple cores or whatever, then okay, that's great. But don't help us out by unloading everything in your salad bar into the compost bin, please. So anyway, next slide. This is some of the things. I have these examples on the website you can download and print out, but I use these in Eugene where I was, and we put them on the compost bin of what to compost and what not to compost. Some of the things, you know, like bread and rice and proteins that can create bad bacteria, weeds that have gone to seed, you know, that's not good, oils, things like that. Heavily printed glossy paper, those are the bad things. And then the good things, you know, coffee grounds are great, coffee filters, shredded newspaper, cores, peelings, napkins, fruits and veggies without dressing, without all the fat stuff on there too. Those things break down easily and don't promote or don't have the bad bacteria. Okay. So okay, transitioning away from the composting now. One of the things in the gardens that we get a lot of comments about are evidence of animals, like poop or whatever. So what do we do when we have cats and deer? That's an extremely hard situation because you are in their area. I have seen and heard reports that deer can jump as high as 9 feet. So that happened in Lebanon, where they had 9-foot fencing and it didn't do anything to the deer, so they had to put another row of fencing up because they really wanted to keep them out. Some administrators say that you have to have a fence around your garden, and you know, usually fences, they just keep out honest people and not any animals. So but to each their own. If that's one of the things that you have to do, you have to do. I would just say if you find offending material in your garden, you deal with it, you take it out, and you move on, you know, that's, you're going to do as best you can. So there's not a lot you can do with vandalism and things like that too. If people want to get in bad enough, they're going to get in. And the same with a lot of animals too. So it's just a fact of life. So other things of weekly checklists are fertilizer should only be applied by a trained adult. Don't just give it to kids. And hand washing, it should be a must before entering the garden or whenever hands become contaminated. Sick people should be excluded from activities. And really sick people shouldn't be at school anyway. That's my thing. So if they're vomiting or diarrhea or things like that, you don't want them harvesting food for feeding or anything like that. And I say, shoes, there's a lot of people that like to be barefoot and stuff, but there's nails and things in gardens and sharp things, so no flip-flops or bare feet. And then manure, although I use chicken manure, and I have chickens, and I use that with school gardens deal with a highly susceptible age group, and so we just don't recommend using untreated manure in a school garden setting at schools because of E. coli and things like that. You can get commercially prepared that is like ran through a kiln and the bacteria has been killed off or whatever, and that would be fine. But I would just refrain from doing it yourself. Yeah, using your own manure. No, your own manure. I wouldn't do that at all. Okay, next. Okay, so serving the food, like I said before, use the USDA guide if the cafeteria isn't prepping and serving your food. So there's that. Don't use pesticides or insecticides. That's actually a law in Oregon. There's a process to do that. Like if you ever had to use pesticides or insecticides, you have to actually, the school has to post things weeks ahead of time and do all this stuff. And so they don't do that really anyway. It's highly poisonous, so I wouldn't suggest doing that in the garden. Don't use gray water, wastewater, recycled water, anything like that. And then containers used to transport food should be food grade and cleanable. No wicker, you can't really sanitize that, it'll hold in bacteria. The staff training goes through everything that I've just talked about in detail. The staff would sign the log and you'd keep it for a year in your book. Student leaders in charge of compost stations should be trained in that piece, so they would attend it as well to your older students. So for the whole classrooms that come through, you'd put a whole classroom through and just do on day one of, first garden day of the year, and you just talk to, ensure they listen to the person in charge. That's really a big deal because they're not just going to be a free-for-all, whatever they say go. Hygiene, washing hands, they go over that. Shoes and physical safety, dealing with tools, eating right out of the garden. There's one thing about, like, if you're, they need to follow the cue of the school garden person because, they might have things in there that they shouldn't eat, like rhubarb leaves, which are poisonous or whatever. So they should always, always, always ask, or never just pick something out and eat it themselves unless they're instructed to do that. But eating right out of the garden, they don't need to do things like go out and wash their hands. But if you're harvesting food for a meal, then by all means, yes, you need to wash your hands and stuff. I use the analogy, like if I make myself a sandwich, I don't have to wash my hands. But if I'm making a sandwich for you, then I have to. That's the kind of the thing with food service and serving food to the public. Then you need to do that. So yeah, ill students need to be excluded. They shouldn't be in school anyway. And then we recommend doing this log for each classroom one time a year and keep it and sign it on. Just wrapping up now, so just another slide or two. Yeah, that is not a cheeseburger and a bowl of fries. Okay, next slide. So questions we're going to hold. I see a couple have come in. We're going to hold. And next slide, that is my email address, rick.sherman@state.or.us. Most of you know it anyway. In case you don't get to a question right now, you can always get me later. And next slide. There, yeah, well, that was quick. Yeah, I have to show that for a little bit. So now would be a good time while you keep this one up. You want to, let's say hi to Amy and have Amy introduce Louva, and that took exactly a half hour. Good. My coffee's cold.
Amy, can you say something? Let's make sure we can hear you.
Oh.
Sounded promising.
Are you there?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I've also unmuted Louva as well.
Okay, great. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Amy Gilroy. I'm Rick's counterpart at the Oregon Department of Agriculture. I'm the farm to school manager here. And one of my roles is to oversee Food Corps Oregon, which for, I guess, those of you that don't know what Food Corps is, it's a service-based organization similar to AmeriCorps that places service members in schools to teach kids where their food comes from, how to grow it, and how to make healthy food choices. We have about 10 service sites in different regions across Oregon, and many of our service members are managing production scale gardens at schools. And they're trying to make efforts to work with cafeteria staff and culinary teachers and students to find fun and easy ways to get more fresh produce into the lunch line and salad bars on an ongoing basis. And so we wanted to hear how other Food Corps sites in the country are doing this and serving garden produce in their cafeterias. So we reached out to the Star School. It's a public charter school near the Navajo Reservation in Arizona to hear how they were working with schools and tribal leaders. And also a state-level garden certification program. Their garden is certified by, I think, the Arizona Department of Health Services. And so Louva is going to talk a little bit about that. And so, yeah, we're just hoping to hear from them, to hear more about their program. And so I'm going to turn it over to Louva Montour. She's the culinary instructor at the Star School. And Stephanie Heimberg, who is the Food Corps service member at Star School, to share more about their program. And I'm going to advance their slides. So I'm going to figure out how to do that. It might take me just a minute. So maybe, let's see, if you want to leave my line open and then I can tell Louva when she can start. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Is everybody able to see my screen? Or maybe, Ren, could you? Okay.
There you go. I think we're up there now.
Yeah,
I think we can see it now.
Okay.
Hey,
Let me.
I got one message saying that we couldn't be heard.
Say that again.
Oh, can everyone hear? I received one message saying that we couldn't be heard. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, my slides are, everybody can see my screen now. There should be a picture of, I think, the Star. There's a Star School with a, looks like a flowering tree in front of it. Okay, great. So why don't we turn it over to Louva and Stephanie, and if one of you just want to let me know when you'd like me to advance slides, just say next slide.
Okay. Hi. My name is Louva Montour. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Can you hear me?
Yes, you can be heard.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes, this is the Star School. I have been here since 2001. I've been the school went in business. And this picture is actually a picture of our very first building. And just a couple of years ago, we attached that the greenhouse. And so, and then over on the left door, that is our home economics classroom, which used to be our cafeteria. But anyhow, I am the culinary instructor right now, but the past few years I was the food service manager, the home economics teacher, and also the wellness program coordinator. And we've been doing the farm to school activities for a very long time, since we've worked with our local Navajo farmers from the beginning, and they're the ones that worked on the landscape around the schools. And so we've had that relationship from the beginning and then just kind of built on it. And so we had our garden certified in 2014. I think it was 2014, hopefully I'm right, but it's been a couple of years. So the process, you can go to the next slide. Okay, this is just another picture. This is actually today. So we have a lot of trees that we planted, fruit trees and some ornamental trees. There's a lot of juniper trees around in the school area. And at the far end, that's our gym and new cafeteria and the middle school classrooms. And so our campus is expanding. We have about 130 students enrolled right now, preschool through 8th grade. And most of our students are Navajo students. And we have our buses that run out to Look Community and Solani Lake, which is like, Solani Lake is about 45 to 50 miles away, so that's how far our school buses run, and then also into Flagstaff, which is about 25 miles. And so that's how far our students come. I would like to have Stephanie introduce herself right now.
I'm muted, but I think you'll be able to hear me from Louva's computer because we're sitting next to each other. But my name is Steph Heimberg, and I'm the food corps service member at the STAR School. And so I've been here since the beginning of August, actually, and sort of been trial by fire since the beginning. I didn't really have a background in gardening, and certainly not in making gardens safe for cafeteria use, but I've learned a lot on the job, and Louva's been instrumental in helping me get up to speed. But that is, yeah, that's me.
Okay, next slide. Oh, that's just a pretty picture of some of our, another one of our fruit trees on campus. But what I needed to cover was the certification process that we had to, so like I said in the beginning, we've worked with our local farmers, and so they grow Navajo corn, blue corn, squash, a variety of squash, like pumpkin, and then there's watermelon, cantaloupe. And we used to take our students out to the farms and harvest, help them harvest or help them, take care of the gardens, like hoe or pull weeds or water, whatever needed to be done throughout the year. And so some of it they used to donate to the school, but their farms are not certified either. And so that's how we started. The students here wanted to learn how to cook. And so as an after-school program, we started a club and where they did a lot of cooking and used a lot of that produce that was coming from, donated from the farmers. And that's basically how we started. And then also we started our own gardens, and we just kind of used it in our home economics class. And also at the after-school program, and just for cooking, just, kids having fun. So as time went on, the farm to school came up, and which was about 8 years ago or something like that. And so we got a grant, a USDA grant, and so that's how we started working on getting our own garden certified. And so what I did was, since I was a food service manager and then also taking care of the gardens, and we were using them in our classes, but we wanted to take this next step. And so what I did was I reached out to Arizona Department of Education's Farm to School coordinator. And so I called them, and Ashley Shimke's her name. She's the Farm to School coordinator. I reached out to her, and I just talked to her, and I said, this is what we are doing here at our school. We would like to get our garden certified and be able to use it in our cafeteria. And so I said, we just want to do things right. So she came up. It really didn't take her long. It took her, within the next week or so, she came up to our school because we're located in northern Arizona. And so she came and she just observed. She came in and she observed in the home economics classes, and then she observed in the cafeteria during our lunch period. And so then at the end of the day, then we met. And she really liked everything that we were doing. And it was just, regular day. We weren't having an event or anything during that time. And so it was just, just a regular day. So she said she really liked what we were doing. And so she just told me, you can start by writing a food safety plan. That was our first step. And doing a HACCP plan. And so at that time, I had written out a HACCP plan for our meals program for the food service. And so it was kind of the same thing, just using the USDA. A lot of, USDA has a lot of resources, so that's what we went by to help us. With all the requirements, hand washing and putting up labels and signs and harvesting, using gloves. Our students usually use gloves, and most things harvesting in the garden or when they're cooking in the in the classes too. So just all the whatever we could do as far as food safety. And then outside, the materials that was used in the gardens, like the raised beds, the untreated wood. There were some things that was mentioned earlier. And then also our water is also, we have our own well here at the school. So we had to have our well tested. We usually get it tested every year for lead. And so we use that for drinking water and also for our gardens. If there's, if we need to have water haul, we usually get it from Flagstaff. Our soil was also tested, and we use the Soil Secrets, which is USDA certified for our food produce. But we have a lot of other trees around campus, and so we've tried different types of composting. There was the bokashi, there's other types of compost that our middle school has tested, and but we only use it for the trees that are outside, not on our food gardens. And there was, there's been some challenges, like pest control. Last year, or 2016 year, we really didn't use much at all in our meals program because of the pests. There was a lot of rodents, and so there was a lot of places where we had to close up, and if a door was left open, sometimes, they would get in that way, and so just really making sure that, that the gardens were not just open just to anyone. And so we get a lot of visitors too, and so we need to have them, sign in before they go to the gardens. Or sometimes now a lot of times we just kind of look through the window. We also have aquaponics and hydroponics, and those two are not certified. So whatever we're growing there, we don't use in our meals program. Because there's really, there's no set rules yet for hydroponics and aquaponics, and so that's the reason. But everything else, all the gardens, we have a main greenhouse that you've seen a picture of, and then we have an outdoor, if you go to the next slide, this is our outdoor garden, and so this is certified. And we have the raised beds against the building there. And you'll see the building with the windows inside there. That is our aquaponics. So, and we have gardens out at the preschool and kindergarten. That's also certified. And we have gardens by the in the foyer, actually, at the administration building, which is also certified. And last year we have a new garden, or built a new garden, which is our Three Sister Garden, where we grow corn, beans, and squash. And so that's a new one, and that is also certified. And so we did get it is every year we have to have it recertified. And so far, we've been doing okay. So I don't know if Stephanie wants anything to add.
I think you hit a lot of it. Yeah, it's there. I think it's been interesting working with gardens that are, with respect to the perspectives that I hear in like the food core orientations. It's been interesting and challenging to work at a school that is certified for use in the school cafeteria because there are a lot more guidelines that you have to make sure that you're following. And I think it's a great thing. It's so cool to be able to put food in the cafeteria and have the kids see that that's the same stuff that they were harvesting in gardening class. But then you run into these really frustrating challenges too, like the fact that the compost has to reach a certain temperature, at least in the state of Arizona. I don't know if that's a national regulation or an Arizona state regulation, but the compost has to reach a certain temperature for a certain amount of time in order for it to be used in school gardens that will then be used in the cafeteria. So any of our gardens that are USDA certified, we can't use any compost that we have. So that's, always new challenges and takes creativity. But yeah, that's
Okay. Next slide. Okay. This is a picture of a spinach roulade.
mm-hmm.
It's a spinach roulade recipe that we tried. And we do grow spinach here at the school. So what we do in our culinary classes is we just try to think of different ways we can use our food other than just adding it to the salad bar. And so actually to make it more safe, it's best that the food is cooked. So this is one way. This is spinach with mutton. So the meat is mutton with mushroom, kind of like a mushroom gravy. And then you just kind of, roll it up after that and then slice it up. And the students really liked it. We tested this recipe a few times. So actually we made recipe cards. And so which is a lot of fun. Students they like to eat, and so I think they're more willing to try to eat different types of food when they prepare it. So because they know what's in it, and they can. If they see a recipe and they don't want the onions in there or something like that, then they'll say, oh, okay, I don't want that in there. And then some others will say, oh, I want it in there. So then sometimes we'll make two different ones, and so to see which one they prefer. So this is just one recipe. Next slide, please. So here we have a couple of students, and like I said, they have to wear their hairnets. They know their procedures when they come into class. They come in, they go straight to the sink, and they fix their hair, put on their hairnets and their aprons and their gloves, and so they know what to do to get ready to work with food. Next slide, please. And so here is a picture of students taste testing. And I think this is a picture of a different recipe that we did. We try to work with a lot of traditional foods. So this is blue corn dumplings with berry glaze. Sumac berry. Sumac is actually a wild berries that grow in our area. And so this is a new recipe that we tried, and it was actually really good. So what they're doing right now is they are taste testing, and then they fill out the forms. I think all the information like how does the food look? Does it look good? How does the texture look? You know, does it look smooth, or how do you think it will taste? How does it feel on your tongue? They answer all kinds of questions like that. And then they're the ones that usually say, you know, can we have this in the cafeteria? We want this to be served in the cafeteria. And so then if there's like a high demand for a certain recipe, then I send that to our ADE, to the farm to school coordinator. I send it to her, and she will send her our recipe, and then she turns it into a standardized recipe. And so we have quite a few recipes that Ashley Shimke from ADE has really helped us with. And so we, just like there was a recipe which is kind of a favorite, which is a carrot salad. And we were just making the traditional carrot salad, you know, with the mayonnaise. And then after a while, they told me that some students started telling me that they don't really care for the carrot salad. They said, well, we don't really like it because we don't like the mayonnaise. And I didn't even know that was happening. So we came back into home ec, and then I said, okay, let's work on that carrot salad. They said, we like carrots, we just don't like the mayonnaise. And so we changed it. We changed that recipe, and instead of using mayonnaise, we used sour cream. And then they didn't really like the raisins, so then we changed that to crushed granolas, and to give it some texture, you know, some crunch. And they really liked it. That's one of the favorites for their lunch. So, okay, next slide. This is the last one. And so we are under the Peanut Desert demonstration projects. We're at our school. And I guess I can answer questions if there's something that I did not cover. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Louva and Stephanie. This is Amy. Before we open it up, I do have a question about that last, your last slide. So as you're testing these recipes out, like the sumac salad dish and that spinach wrap, before those recipes go to become standardized, or before you send those to your farm to school coordinator, are those recipes selected by the kids, or how do you go about selecting the recipes for them to try?
We use, since we
like let's say for the blue corn dumpling, we already have a recipe, a standardized recipe for the blue corn dumpling, but the sumac berry is different. I'm not sure if that would be standardized, only because it is wild food, and even though it does grow here on our campus, it is not part of our certified gardens, but it is traditional foods too, which is sumac berries is used in, for tea or added to tea, and we just tried, using it as a glaze to sweeten the corn mush. So what we do is, if they're, if students really like it, and they want it to be served in the cafeteria, then I would send off the recipe to Ashley Shimke. And so then she'll decide if, I think with that recipe, she would probably just do the, but then we already have the mush, the dumpling recipe, that is already standardized. So the other is just kind of used as a sweetener, the sumac berry glaze.
Okay. So are those,
So it will be a recipe that people can use at home, not so much at a public facility. So we do both. We make recipes that they can do at home, and we also do recipes that can be standardized and be used in a public facility.
okay. So some of those dishes that you and the recipes that you've worked on that have been standardized are being, some of those are being served in the, or prepared and served in the cafeteria, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So I think either Michelle or Ren had asked me to, oh, it looks like she's back on now. So I guess we can open it up to questions for Rick about the produce safety manual that the Oregon Department of Education has available, or to Louva and staff from the Star School. If people have questions, go ahead and submit those into the chat box. Okay, we have a question from Sarah Phillips. And Rick, it looks like this question's directed to you. What regulations or guidelines do we need to keep in mind for tasting from the garden other than hand washing? Is it okay to be picking and tasting right there without washing produce? And I guess maybe, Louva and Steph, if you have experience with this as well, feel free to chime in as well.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, here we are. Sorry guys, I had a big long answer to one question and I was speaking and we were muted the whole time. Remember when I said anything that goes wrong is Ren's fault? So there you go. Okay, so anyway, yes, in answer to the question that Amy posed about grazing from the gardens, again, I would rely on the school garden coordinator's expertise. I would say, again, don't eat anything without their lead. And then, yeah, if you're doing something yourself, like picking a leaf or something like that, I don't think it's really necessary to do the whole. I mean, you want to be as clean as you can, and yeah, I would recommend people wash their hands. But if it's just not available, if you're doing a grazing thing like that, or for a leafy thing, if you pop it in your mouth, that's one thing. But if you're going to get a carrot out of the ground full of dirt, yeah, you'd want to probably wash that off, just at least rinse it. But if you're harvesting for for the public, then definitely yes, you have to wash your hands and stuff. That's the fine line there. And also there was one other question that came in about if you're using a commercial product, like a commercially available soil mix or things, should you have that tested? I would say no. The commercially available stuff, they would do that anyway, but you can ask them for a report, or if you talk to if you just in your manual in the Oregon manual said no, we use a commercial product, that's going to suffice, and a health inspector isn't going to want to see that. But if you need to find it, you can certainly talk to them and they'll be able to provide that. No, those were the only questions that I had. Oh, one more. Okay.
What is the purpose or advantages of having a certified school garden as opposed to not being certified?
Okay, I'm going to defer that to Arizona because, like as we said, in Oregon, we don't need to be certified. Although I would just say that one of the things that our school garden manual says that the person in Oregon can be certified, the school garden coordinator can, but we don't have a certification process for our garden. But I would hand that back to Louva and ask her to answer that one.
In Arizona, we have to purchase from an approved source, which means that the gardens has to be certified. So just like our main food distributor for our school is Shamrock Farms. And so they work with Marcon, and Marcon is certified. And so since our traditional farmers on the reservations are not certified with good handling practices, we cannot use their produce in our school meals. And that's just, the law in Arizona.
I think to add on to that too, what I think a lot about this year is like food sovereignty and how important that is to like Native people, and the idea of being able to source food from your garden and put it in your cafeteria. When we work at a school specifically that serves like 98% Native students, it's just reinforcing that bigger theme. That's obviously not something that's going to be pertinent for everyone, and the probably more pertinent thing is just that without certification, we can only use that produce in our whole class. This opens us up to another outlet to use that food. But just as an additional reason that it was so important for Star School to do that is would you say that Louva is to kind of speak to the food sovereignty movement that's very pretty important in Native communities.
Okay, that was the last question I have in. If anybody has any additional questions, we'll stay open for a couple of minutes and be right back.
This is Amy. I just wanted to sort of build off what Louva and Steph just mentioned about some of the requirements. So I think, in some instances, I mean, this is a good example of what Rick was talking about earlier, where we don't have, in Oregon, we don't have specific regulations, at least at the state level, that require schools to purchase food from reputable sources, but some schools have decided to take that upon themselves. And so the example Louva gave, where they're required to purchase from a farmer or producer who has been certified either with probably good agricultural practices or good handling practices, which is called GAP-GIP. That's a voluntary certification, but eventually many of these producers, even though they may be exempt under these new federal food safety laws that are now being enacted across the country, to some extent, some of them will have to come into certain levels of compliance with those federal food safety laws, particularly around produce. And so, while we have that happening on the supply side or the production side, some schools and some institutions are beginning to require that produce that is used in their facilities have some level of food safety certification. So it really is, at least in Oregon's case, and Rick can chime in on this or share maybe specific examples where some districts have decided to require food safety certification of any vendor that they procure from. And that can include, at some point, a school garden, depending on what that transaction situation looks like. So if they are purchasing from their garden and somehow, or either reimbursing for those purchases of that produce, there may be a requirement through their business office to either have an on-garden or on-farm, in that situation, food safety plan. A good example here in Oregon, where we're trying to, I don't know if Casey White's on the call from Calapooya or the Bethel Farm, but that is a really good example in Oregon where we're just trying to find that place in which we need to be safeguarding the food that's produced on her farm and then being sold or shared with, I think, 5 or 6 different schools right now in the Bethel district. Right now, they don't have a district level food safety policy for that produce, but I think they're moving in that direction in the sense that Casey's working on an on-farm food safety plan, and she's also she's been in some workshops and trainings around good agricultural practices and GAP-GIP. So I think in Oregon anyway, it is sort of right now, I think a little bit of a gray area, and districts are deciding what's best for them and what is a reputable source. They're able to describe that to some extent.
Yep, and I can give you a little background on that. And as far as the rules as far as we're concerned at Oregon Department of Education, I think a lot of states have similar laws, but they're interpreted differently. Like you've heard the reputable source come a bunch of times, both from us and from Arizona. But in our case, when I first got here, that was it, and nobody had an opinion about school garden produce. It pretty much wasn't done when I came here 5 years ago. We were like a lot of other states and said, we don't know if it's safe, so just don't do it. And so that was my first job here, was to say, okay, what would it take to do things properly to do this? So I went on the offensive and we wrote this book. And then we started showing it to all the food service directors, or not the food service directors, we started showing it to all the health inspectors. And they're like, yeah, this addresses most of our concerns, and here's a couple more. And so after all the edits, that was how everyone bought off. Like here at Department of Ed, my bosses and stuff said, yep, that's good for us. We've put our stamp of approval on it. So it's how we interpret the rule for what is a reputable source, because there was no way to do it without documenting and stuff what you were doing. So that's how we did that there.
We don't have any more questions coming in, so any additional questions, feel free to send emails to Rick Sherman or myself or Amy Gilroy. Thank you all very, very much for joining us. And
Actually, Ren, I'm sorry,
more?
can I ask? Yeah, Ren, this is Amy. Can I ask one more question of Louva and Steph while we have them on the line? Louva, I had a question about the cafeteria staff. How are you working with cafeteria staff, or are cafeteria staff are they harvesting any produce from the garden, or are they how are they involved in the garden or working with you to prep any produce that's supplied from the garden?
They, let's see, they, they usually, well, the students and Stephanie usually does the harvesting, and so then they bring that into our home ec kitchen where they clean and they pre-wash it, and then they actually wash it like a couple of times before they take it to the main kitchen. And then so then they, from the main kitchen, they use it, they wash it again and go through it again and wash it again, and then whether they use it for the salad bar or cook it, they just, you know, and they record it in their food production. So I know that's how we've had it set up that way the last couple of years, and so I've worked with the service staff for a number of years, and so I guess we just kind of, since I was like kind of all over the place, the gardens and then the home ec, you know, classroom, and then bringing it into, since I was a food service manager, and I would bring it into the kitchen, and then they were my helpers at the end, you know, or at the time. And so we just kind of had to have, you know, started a routine. And so they're still, you know, doing the same as we have been. So I think it's basically having good communication and having good relationship with the food service staff, which really helps. And, you know, and they come in here also when they have time to help in cooking and home economics. I know one of the ladies used to come in during the after-school program, and she and I used to work with the students in preparing, you know, just different types of food. And so just kind of being used to what we do here and how we handle our food, and so we, you know, have built that trust. I think that's what works.
And so we have some Oregon Food Corps service sites on the line, and so I'm curious, and I don't know if they're thinking about this, but have you, how long have you all been a Food Corps service site, and what have you seen as the benefit of having Food Corps, you know, Food Corps working alongside of you, or what have been sort of the key, you know, milestones that Food Corps has helped you establish there at the Star School?
We had a different person before, Tyrone Thompson. He was our Food Corps service member for a couple of years. And he's the one that I really worked with in on the certification process. And then also building the gardens, expanding the gardens, and building, you know, raised beds, and just really expanding all of our gardens on campus. And to me, I think food court service members are a big help, you know, in schools with the gardens. Um, Not only do they work out in the gardens, but they also work with the students and teaching nutrition, and there's different kinds of curriculums that are out there that they use also. And and the kids really enjoying, coming out of their classroom, being outside, and working hands-on. And so, all the way from like kindergarten, they're out there working in the gardens and taking care of the plants and watching their food grow. And then they recognize it once it gets, to the kitchen. And so they're more willing to eat, their vegetables. So and also the taste testing also. Stephanie does a lot of taste testing. I think we grew some turnips. Like last month, I think it was, we had some turnips. And so they bring it in and they clean it, and then they cut it up, and she put it on a platter, and I don't remember what else they added, but they did a lot of taste testing, and just cutting it up different ways and shredding it, or just different things like that, other than taking the bite out of it at the garden. So if you add, a nice platter, add some presentation to it or something like that, then it does really look good. And so even just for turnips, I tried it too, and it was really good. It's actually kind of sweet. So it really helps. It is a big job. It's a big job to, there's a lot of, even with the bookkeeping and who's going to sign in and what class is going in there and what are they going to do. We have to keep track of what goes on in the gardens day to day. And that's all part of our certification, our good handling practices. And so it's just, it's a lot. To me, it's really helpful to have a food service, not food service, food court service member to be part of the school. And not only does she help out in the gardens, but she also helps in the kitchen, in the main kitchen too, like serving whenever they need an extra hand or something, or an event, things like that. I know we have a few events here at the school. We have our Harvest Festival in the fall, and we have a lot of traditional foods, food demonstrators that come out and work with traditional foods, and then people out in the gardens, and then people cooking, and what we do is, or even butchering sheep. These are all traditional foods, and then it's just a celebration to, to honor our farmers. And so we cook all day for sometimes 2 days, and then have a big meal in the evening. So it's a community event, and it's open to anyone in the community. And Food Corps in Arizona come out, and we get quite a few people. The fellow comes out, and she helps, and with serving food or, you know, just anything, anywhere help is needed and food preparation. So to me, otherwise, you know, it would be kind of hard to find people to fill in these, you know, these things that need to get done. So working with food and, you know, growing and harvesting and cleaning and all that is, there's a lot of steps to it before it gets to the table or to the serving line.
Okay, thanks, Louva. Hey, we want to be mindful of the time to everybody. We don't see any other questions come in, but you can always email us. And just a reminder, we're going to have this recorded and up on our website relatively in a short amount of time, probably in the next hour or so you can get it and listen to this over and over and over again to your heart's content. So thank you very much, and I think, thank you, I want to say thank you to Louva and Steph, thank you, and Amy for participating in this. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Louva.
Bye.